This is Australian Real. I'm Tony Inman, and my guest today is Tilai Clifford. Tilai, welcome to Australian Real.
Thank you, Tony.
Tilai's been through some of life's challenges that none of us would ever really want to have to face. But more of that in a moment. Tilai, let's get a sense of who you are. Can I ask you, where did you grow up and what was your childhood like?
Well, I'm a Perth girl, born and bred in the hills. I had a lovely childhood, actually. My parents took good care of me and always encouraged me to do my best. So I went to private school St Bridget's up in Lesmurdie, and I still live up there today.
Lovely
I have
school.
travelled, yes, I have travelled between, but it's always been the place that I loved, and I went right through to finished high school, did university, and then started travelling.
Awesome. So you're quite the adventurer from what I recall from our previous conversations.
Oh,
Where did you go?
absolutely. I got myself a visa, as often people do, and went over to work in the UK. And what I thought would maybe be, say, 12 months, 2 years, turned into 5 years travelling. So I based myself in London and did lots of hopping around, backpacked a lot. And then I actually got started in a career. I realised after a couple of years that it was time to get a bit more serious about earning a living. And I started working and developing a career in London, and loved every minute of it. Been to so many countries and did so much. I still miss it, actually. London's a great place to be.
How did you find it being an Australian in England? They seem to be very keen on the Aussies over there.
Oh yes, they always encouraged us, and I found using the temp companies that it was easy to get work because we were known for having a good work ethic. So I did lots of different things in the beginning. I worked in an ice cream factory, and actually had a job where I pushed the wicks, drilled the hole and pushed the wick through candles in a little for not very good money, actually, but it was a job.
Maybe that was the start of your journey on enlightenment.
Maybe.
Yeah. So what changed after that then? What eventuated from there? You're working in London. What came next?
Well, it started to get, after so many years, I was loving it, but my parents were getting a little bit older, and the draw to come home was starting to feel a little bit stronger. I met a man, and we started to get serious, and we talked about living in the UK. He actually wanted to try somewhere else, and I said, would he consider coming back to Australia? And in the end, that's what we did. So he emigrated out to Australia with me, and we moved back here in 2002 and started our life over here. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it was good. It was time to come back, and it's nice. Living in the UK is wonderful, but it's a very demanding lifestyle, particularly in London.
Yeah.
And he really enjoyed the change and the more relaxed lifestyle that we have here in Perth. Mm. So we started to settle down, started back on our careers, and built a home, as you do. Mm-hmm. Got married.
Yep.
In 2004, and we were ticking along quite nicely for a while there. So yeah, I guess it was all going really well up until that point.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
So what happened?
Well, we got engaged, and I guess in hindsight, which is always a beautiful thing, there were signs that things weren't going as well as they should have been, and I really should have made the decision at that point to end the relationship. But as you do, you always have hope, and we probably, I think, tend to deny things from ourselves when you're in the moment and you want things to work out. So before we actually got married, there was a little bit of, I guess, I feel funny saying domestic violence because it wasn't like he was brutal with me or anything, but there was a lot of emotional things now that I know had a real impact on my sense of self and my ability to express myself as an individual and my confidence. And then we did have an argument one time where he threw me over the sofa, and he'd cupped his hand around my neck and he pushed me like that, and it actually really damaged my neck. The end result, like an instant pain, I knew something really bad had happened. And the end result of that was that I had a disc bulge in my neck, and that took me out of action for about 3 months solidly, to the point where I couldn't use my left arm. I had to stop working.
Right.
We were looking at surgery. It was quite a severe injury.
Yes. And did you feel that was something that really would be labelled as an accident, or was it just a heat of the moment thing, or?
It was a heat of the moment thing.
Yeah.
And he was terribly sorry, and I knew that it wasn't something he wasn't in the habit of doing that, and so it was forgiven and it was tucked. We never told anybody else what had happened, and we got past it.
Yeah.
And carried on, and then my physical well-being settled down, and we got married, and life carried on. It took a while.
You mentioned that you took 3 months off, and you had a period there where what was that like when you were sort of incapacitated? Did you get a sense of that impacted on your mental health at that point as well? Then your overall sense of.
Oh gosh, it was really scary, because I was lay on a floor on so many drugs. I don't even know if I really remember the days. I couldn't do anything but lie on my back, and was on an awful lot of drugs. So even when I was going and having the treatments, I can remember the physio saying, "I will repeat this a few times because it's not going to sink in because of the medications you're on." So it was a bit of a blur, and I guess the fact that you're on so many painkillers, and I spent most of my time sleeping, it's vague, but the pain was intense.
Yeah.
The sort of thing where if you rolled over onto your side, it'd wake you up in the middle of the night. I couldn't eat cereal sitting up. I'd eat my breakfast with a bowl on my chest, and that sort of thing. So it was debilitating, but it was frightening.
Yeah.
But in the moment, just trying to cope with everyday life, really.
Did you think that you would come through that? What was the diagnosis from the doctors? Were they giving you an expectation of how long it would take to convalesce? Well,
at the time, the Medicare PBS wasn't covering the disc surgery. So it wasn't like I could go. I had private health cover, but I couldn't go and just have the surgery because it was going to be a $15,000 thing. So it was a difficult decision to make. And I was getting encouragement through the physiotherapy that I could recover, that it was just going to take time. So for those reasons, I took that path. And I did actually come quite well for a while. It was taking a lot of management. I was being treated twice a week for a solid 18 months to stay stable. And then what happened was in 2006, I had a recurrence, and it was something silly. I think I was playing basketball, and something happened, and it just set it off again.
Okay.
And that time, the actual nerves in my arm went, and the pain was even worse. From a sensory point of view, nerve pain is something very special. If you've never had it, it's it's incredible. It's incredibly distracting. And at that point, I started to really feel the struggle. And of course, at the same time, our relationship was going through some real issues. My husband was a charming man and had always been a flirt, and I knew that about him, but there was starting to get the noises in the background that there was things going on that I wasn't aware of. And of course you start to get paranoid, there's more conflict, and the whole lot was starting to really build up on me. So when the pain became quite bad, I started looking elsewhere for, I think, when I think about it, I think I was looking for answers. It's like my life doesn't feel happy. What's wrong with me?
Right.
And what am I not doing right? And so I started searching around. I talked to people about spirituality. I started delving into ideas about meditation, which I've never been any good at because I'm just a busy brain person. I can't help myself. So I find it really hard to do those relaxation things and that sort of stuff. But I spoke to this one woman who was actually a medium, and I said to her about the church that she was going through, which was all about spirituality. And when she spoke to me, she said, "Have you ever thought that you might have depression?" And it had never occurred to me. And I got online, I did a couple of questionnaires, and the results really shocked me, actually. I was quite, by the score, it was saying, yeah, you're depressed. And so I did the right thing, and I went and saw a doctor, and immediately I was diagnosed and started on a mental health care plan.
Right.
So that was in 2006.
So really it was the intervention of a friend,
Yeah.
noticing that and suggesting to you that you go and take some action to investigate at least whether it was something more sinister.
Yes. Yeah, it had never occurred to me that I was just depressed.
Yeah.
You know, I was taking it all on board as things that were wrong with me, I guess. So it was a relief.
Yeah.
To know that there was a chemical imbalance, and I accepted that. You know, I thought I took it on board as well. This is part of. I didn't blame myself and go into that whole stigma thing. It was a little bit difficult, but once I'd actually said it out loud and it was acknowledged, I thought, okay, now I can deal with this. So I started on some medication, and I started seeing a counsellor who I still see.
Right.
Same lady,
Yes.
12 years later. And she helped me actually face some of the issues that I was dealing with in my marriage, and about how I was making myself to blame and questioning myself, and that actually I was okay. And it helped me then start on a bit of a healing process, and I guess a learning about who I was and what was important to me. And so I started to learn, at least discover that I'd been punishing myself. So learning that about myself was the beginning of a different path.
So while you were doing all that work on yourself, was your husband taking anything on board for himself?
We talked about it. Initially, he wasn't the slightest bit interested in the depression, the whole thing. It was like a la 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 la. So I dealt with it on my own. We did a little bit of counselling. That didn't really resolve in anything. But he, I guess what I'd known all along, and I came to the honest answer for myself, was that we just weren't on the same page, and that he was interested in him and not being part of a couple.
Right.
And that was where I was trying to force the situation, I guess, and have him embrace being part of a couple as my value set saw it. My expectations were, I guess.
Right. So it's a lot to do with expectations and managing the results, whether they achieve those expectations or not.
Yeah.
So how did things come to a head then?
I discovered that he was communicating and seeing another lady. At the time, I didn't believe that there was any physical activity and any sex going on, so we agreed that we'd work through it. But at that point, I was like, I can't have you here in the house. So we actually had a little unit that we'd bought when we first moved over to Perth, so he went and lived in that. and I lived in the house, and we continued to try and carry on with our relationship. And the crux of it all came, there was a few different things that happened and conflict, but the crux of it all came when we were going to an open day at his work, and he'd said he would pick me up at a certain time. So I got up on the Saturday morning and was ready and waiting, and 9:30 came and he wasn't there. I tried calling his mobile, no answer. I called the landline, it went to voicemail, and you start to worry. And after about 45 minutes, I left a message saying I'm coming over to make sure you're all right. Drove to the flat, let myself in, and found him in bed with another woman. So that was,
the final nail in the coffin.
Yeah, it was a pretty awful thing I can remember losing the plot and going, who the fuck are you? And him physically manhandling me out the unit and locking me out, leaving me standing outside. And that was just, I can feel like my heart's palpitating just thinking about that day. It was horrid.
Yeah.
In the end, he got rid of her, and we had a large conflict, and then I went home and called friends, and of course then everybody, my female friends, came and rallied around me and spent the next 24 hours basically nursing me, as I think I sat in pretty much stunned silence or torrential tears, coming to terms with what had actually happened. So it was a pretty brutal slap in the face.
So even though you knew that things were probably heading in that direction, that was really the kind of very visual confrontation that really nailed it for you, that you knew it definitely was over.
And the funny thing is, I think I was still so weak in myself, and wanting that to be a part of that with him and not wanting to let it go, that was probably one of the only situations that made me realise, like, Tilai, you've got to have your dignity here. You can't let this slide.
Yeah.
Even if he'd have wanted to, and I don't know whether he did. I actually think maybe it was a bit of a setup subconsciously for him too. But I was having a lot of health issues at the time, and so I was in a very vulnerable place, and I'd been in and out of hospital, and a few different things had been going on, along with the neck was stable, but it was another thing, and dealing with the depression. I didn't want to have my relationship end, so it was a really hard slap in the face, and it was forced on me. Yeah.
I think if I remember correctly, you made a comment to me before that you actually asked yourself that question, so how am I supposed to look after myself now?
I did, because the day that happened, and as I was saying with all these tests, what had come about was I was diagnosed 10 days after I found him in bed with this lady. I was officially diagnosed with multiple sclerosis. So I can remember going to the appointment to see the specialist, and I'd had the blood tests and there was all this stuff going on, and then of course this happened, and I went with a dear friend of mine, and we sat there in front of the specialist, and he said, yes, you do have MS. And I just looked at him, and he said, it's all right to cry. And I just didn't have any tears. It was like, I just didn't have anything left. So it was just, well, here's another thing. What else can he hit me with? And I just fell into this stunned numbness, which I was in for, as it turned out, several years afterwards. It was just a shock. I didn't know what to do with it, so I didn't deal with it. Of course, after that, initially, then there was all the time of learning how to, because you had, at that stage, it was injections 3 times a week, and that's all very confrontational, and a real obviously a real emotional shock. It's a scary disease because you don't know what's going to happen. Can't help but Dr. Google it and see, you know, the sort of things that are going on.
Yeah.
And potentially what could happen to you.
The worst case scenarios, which you then, your imagination takes
What
over.
What if?
Yeah.
And that was when I did. And I can remember screaming that down the phone at him as we were going through the whole process of splitting up and being faced with this diagnosis on my own, and saying, who's going to take care of me? How am I going to cope? And with all of that and the depression, what ended up happening was I did have to, because I wasn't physically capable of holding my job down anymore. And I was working part-time. I stepped down from my role altogether, and then went back to part-time work with my job. And I was doing 2 days a week. But that was while what happened. I'm getting a bit tangled up now because it's very emotional time.
Sure, yes, I'm sure. You mentioned to me when we spoke before that your boss didn't want you to quit.
No, he didn't, because I said, with all the depression and everything that was going on, I said, I'm just not doing my job. I can't do this. And I wanted to resign. And he said, I'm not going to let you. I'll give you 12 months unpaid leave, which I took. Thank God, Ron. I will always be grateful of that decision. I lasted 3 months without doing anything, but I needed to have some sort of purpose.
Yeah.
But during that time, and because we were in the middle of the divorce and I'd had the diagnosis, I went on a Centrelink disability pension, and that was a real stronghold for me for quite some time. It was the only sense of support I had. You know, all the money started getting funny amongst us, and I started being locked out of...
financial pressures going on, as well as emotional pressures, as well as all your health issues.
Yeah.
How did you cope? How did you feel with all of that happening all at the same time?
Like nothing else could happen that would make me any more miserable.
Yeah.
I drank a lot.
Mm-hmm.
A lot. And slept a lot. And I was really blessed, actually, I guess, because with the MS Society, I was forcing myself to have counselling as well. There was a lot of support network going on behind the scenes with all that awareness. So I was going twice a week to a counsellor, a psych at the MS Society. Mm-hmm. So a lot of that at the beginning was dealing with what was happening with my relationship. And just that sense of how am I going to cope? How am I ever going to get out of this hole? Disability pension, nobody to take care of me. You know, what's going to happen to me? And learning that it was okay to be as miserable as I was.
Yeah.
And to be kind to myself around that. And then, of course, it's about learning about the coping skills that come along with taking care of yourself, and when you're having a bad day, allowing yourself to have a bad day. But remembering that you can't stay there forever.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, we were talking to a psychologist the other day, and he was explaining that it's okay to feel sad, it's okay to feel angry, as long as you don't stay there.
Yes.
You move on from that. So what came next?
Well, I worked part-time, and I was being supported by the pension, and it took 3 years to sort out my divorce. So basically that whole time I was really struggling, constantly in counselling. I did see a life coach for a while. I had 2 counsellors on the go, and I did see a life coach for a while, all trying to learn how to cope. And at the time it was because I was so unhappy I just couldn't stay there. I had to do something. I'd got in my mind, I never thought about hurting myself, but I didn't care. I wouldn't have cared if something had happened. It was like, you know, just hit me with more.
Yeah.
My mother passed away in 2009, so that happened during that stage as well. And my cat died of a snake bite, which was my only little furry friend. So that was pretty devastating. You know, the things in life happen as well, but because I was in such a bad place, it was just one thing on top of another. So when Mum died, she died from dementia. I didn't even cry. I think I'd probably cried a fair bit beforehand, seeing her deteriorate. But her funeral and that was a numb experience for me.
I remember when we spoke before that I said to you, it sounds like your life's become like a country and western record. It seemed like there couldn't be anything else that could possibly happen to you. You were describing that your experience at the vets. You mentioned to me what happened there.
Oh gosh, yeah. Because he started screaming in the middle of the night, and it was a panic situation, emergency run to the vets. I actually had a panic attack and had to lie down on the floor of the vets. And I was lay there thinking, I thought I was going to vomit, and heavy breathing and all of that sort of stuff. And suddenly I thought to myself, your cat needs you. Get your shit together. Like, pull yourself together. And I just, like that, snap, got up, and I walked over, because at that stage he was screaming, and I think he'd lost his vision. He was on the verge of going into a coma. It was a very traumatic experience. And I held his little face, and I was talking into his face and was able to calm him down. And in hindsight, I'm so glad I did that, because I know I gave him comfort when he needed it. So I'm glad that I was able to snap myself out of that, because I think I would have punished myself about that later. Yeah, it was pretty awful. The whole experience was awful. That whole time.
You mentioned that whilst you were going through all of this, then there was also the divorce to sort out.
Yes.
So just on top of, if that wasn't enough, you were also fighting legal battles.
Yes. Yep, 3 years, and Paul's way of handling the negotiations was basically not to engage. So it was a real struggle, and I spent an awful lot on lawyers trying to get him to come to the party and negotiate. And that was really very stressful, as you can imagine, from a financial point of view as well. I think it was about $30,000 over the 3 years in expenses with that. So the whole time it was just something one after the other. 3 o'clock was the witching hour. I'd always wake up. I did a lot of screaming and crying into my pillow. One of my coping mechanisms was I used to write in a diary. And even to the point where sometimes the pages would be torn up, the pen would be so vicious on the page. And it was just all the time pressure of one form or another. So I certainly, those 3 years, I think what I learnt about myself was that I could endure. And with the experiences that I was having, that I survived. No, I didn't die. I felt like I wanted to at times, and that I was going to, because the pain and the stress was so heavy, but I didn't.
What do you think was inside you? You must have had to dig very deep to find those inner reserves to get you through. Was there anything you could say that was unusual about how you were able to deal with that?
I reached out. I really relied on my friends very heavily, and there's a few people that I will be eternally grateful for the fact that they put up with me. In retrospect, I leaned on them very heavily, and I must have just gone over the same thing over and over and over. And people can give advice, but they can't help you, particularly when you're in such a low place. The only person that can change that is you. So all that time, it was about having that support, and my dad was just marvellous. He used to come round after golf on my days off, and he would get me out of bed, help me do my dishes, bring food. You know, he helped me. And the fact that I just had such a loving, supporting network And when I would have my bad times, even when I was drinking heavily, I would be picking up the phone, and I might pick up the phone and talk to one person, sit there and think that wasn't enough, and pick up the phone and ring. So the support and the tolerance that they gave me during that time was really important. And I didn't sit there and dwell on it on my own. I did a lot, but I did reach out, and I kept on asking for help.
So from their point of view, just being there, even just hearing the same old things coming from you, just being that support was a real help to you.
Yes, absolutely. Okay. Yeah. And for women particularly, other women, the nurturers, that network was really, really important. So I'll be eternally grateful for those that really put up with me when I was at my worst, because I don't suppose I was a very easy person to be around. And having shared that with others now, especially during a divorce, you're a miserable person. It's hard work, being that support. And so, I definitely would recommend, if you're going through that, is you can't sit there and just do it on your own. You just have to have help. You must.
Right. So you then finally got things resolved, and you had a divorce settlement. I know you had a bit of a party after that to celebrate. So just talk us through that experience.
Wow, to finally, so 2010, it was the official day that the paperwork all came through, the financial settlement and everything. And I thought, I've got to celebrate this. So I had a divorce party, and the girls that had been there for me, I hired a limo and we went out and drank champagne, and I bought myself a tin bucket, a steel bucket from Bunnings, got a couple of copies of the marriage papers, and we went down the beach and had a little sacrificial burning of the paperwork, and toasted my new life.
So there must have been a real sense of wiping the slate clean.
Yes.
A chance to re-establish who you were again.
Yes. It had been a process, but actually the symbolism of it being finally finished was like, now I can make my own choices. For all that time to be still so financially bound up with somebody else, it was really hard work. 3 years is a long time like that. So I thought, right, now I'm independent, and this is what I've been searching for. So it was a great celebration, and I was really happy. So yeah, you're right. I'm moving on.
And you were able to divide up the assets, so you had the security of your own
home
then, and he had the investment properties and so on.
Yeah.
So that gave you at least a home base as well.
That's right.
That you could rebuild from.
Somewhere safe.
Yeah.
That was mine. Yeah. Yeah. One of the couples that had been a really wonderful support to me during all this drama, actually were getting a divorce. And as you do, I provided the same support back and kept in touch with both of them. And Tim, who was the husband of the two, he and I had always enjoyed sharing meals and things. So when I go over and visit Tim and Debbie, we'd have a meal together, and we'd always have a laugh, and Debbie and I would have a drink, and Tim would cook us dinner. So I'd been keeping in touch with both of them and making sure they were okay, and had seen Debbie a few times, but Tim had gone underground for a while. So a few months later, anyway, he contacted me and said, would you like to come over and try out one of my new recipes? To which I said, yes, of course. What wine should I bring? And when I turned up there and knocked on the door, I felt nervous. It was like, this is strange. It's the first time I'd seen him really on his own. And he opened the door, and I looked at him, and I thought, oh. We went, hi, and it was just a different dynamic immediately. And I was feeling a little bit awkward. And in hindsight, it's kind of funny, but I was a bit embarrassed. And anyway, we're like, a couple of wines, and we started chatting, and it was all lovely, and we enjoying the meal. And I can remember sitting there and thinking, after I'd relaxed a little bit, thinking to myself, this man is always going to be my friend. Doesn't matter what happens, he's going to be my friend. And then suddenly it was like he'd been there all along, this person. And we just clicked. It was like we both knew that we were in love. And I can't even explain it. It was amazing because it was almost like from the very beginning we knew that we'd be married and that we would be together. But it was like I knew who he was. I knew he was a good man. I knew him as a husband to my friend, which was a bit weird, of course. But he was just it. He was just it. And it just hit me like a bolt of lightning, I suppose. And for him, the same. So...
Just like in the movies.
It really was. And it seems funny because obviously it's not an easy thing to do when it's somebody that you know and a friend who you care about. There was some dynamics to work out around that. I went and I spoke to Debbie directly and told her what I'd learnt. And she was really supportive, which was wonderful. Thank you, Debbie. Life was too short. And we've never looked back. Yeah, it was such a joy after everything else that had happened to feel so safe and so comfortable. Yeah, it was magic. It changed my life. I mean, he's changed my life. I'm really grateful. I don't think I made it easy for him in the beginning because I'd had such a bad experience and I was still guarded, of course. Mm. And you start doing again the what ifs and the la 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 la. Yeah. Being such a kind, patient person, he was understanding and gave me the support. And I think it was the fact that he let me know that he loved me even when I behaved poorly. And that was something that I don't think I'd had an experience with as much, definitely not in my previous relationship, but even dynamically within my family, perhaps with my mum, who was a very strong woman, and she would, sometimes the love felt a bit conditional. So I think the fact that even if I did behave badly and throw a hissy fit and shout at him or whatever, the next day I'd be punishing myself, which was my way, but he still loved me. And as part of that growth, I've been able to accept that it's okay, that I'm okay, and that I am worthy of love. And he's really helped with my growth with that as a person.
Do you think that you'd put yourself in that sort of situation with the work that you'd already started to do on yourself? You'd already started changing from within, and that then made you a more attractive person to want to be with because you'd done the work on yourself? Absolutely.
Within that period when I was on my own, as I've said, I was doing a lot of counselling work. I think one of the things that I learnt was that you need to know who you are on the inside as an individual and what you value. You know, when somebody said to me, who you are, what your values are, I initially thought, well, be polite to old people, have good manners and those sort of values, which are always there, of course, but it's more about learning about what actually gives you passion. And initially, particularly when I lost my work, I realised that I didn't have any other interest apart from my career. So I had this one great big egg in my basket. And once that was out, the basket was really empty. And people say, oh, you need a hobby and you need this. And I was like, well, I don't even know what I like. Mm. I don't know. And that was incredibly frustrating. And it was a case of actually poking around and trying a few different things to see what sparked my interest. It wasn't easy. It was hard work. I had to force myself because I didn't feel like it. And as I've since learned, that my passion is in volunteering with animals in particular. And I spend a lot of time working with Free the Bears, which is an organisation here in Perth. I did a lot of volunteer work with them, helping them with their website and doing stuff along my skill set. And it gave me a sense of purpose. So I started to, I guess, build up some personal strength and a bit more personal respect, and enjoying my life because I was doing things that I liked and that gave me passion. And the fact that then, because I was giving and people really appreciated it, made me feel needed. And I had a purpose and I was useful. And so it was that sense of building up my own ego and self-respect, and starting to feel a bit better about myself. And I really discovered that was what I loved to do. I went to Cambodia. My parents, God bless them, paid to send me to Cambodia to volunteer at a bear sanctuary with Free the Bears over there for a couple of weeks. And that was a real turning point. Going to a place where there's so much poverty and they're still so happy. They really value family and they're humble. You know, they have real humility. And to see that, happiness isn't what you've got. It isn't about who you perceive to be on the outside. It's about what you value on the inside and holding on to those things and being able to help those people and do something, but not because I was there for the bears, but I was helping their country and I was helping myself by doing something that I enjoyed and giving. And I just thought, life isn't about, because at that stage, being within the divorce and arguing over money and assets and all of that stuff, and how am I going to take care of myself, it feels really about the material stuff. And it took my mind away from that and it brought me back to, you can be happy without things, and that there is grace and humility in life, no matter what your circumstance. And it was enlightening and it was a real gift. And I felt so much peace. So that was a real turning point. And ever since then, I have continued with my voluntary work. And I also got an opportunity as part of the voluntary work. I went to Rotary and approached them for some fundraising for Free the Bears. Mm-hmm. And the person I spoke to actually turned around and said, well, rather than doing that, would you like to be a part of Rotary and come on an exchange program? It's a vocational exchange. And I was like, oh, okay. So this opportunity just seemed to pop out of the blue and I applied for the exchange.
You'd learned to say yes to some new things?
I had, that's right. And I guess the fact that I actually was out there and I spoke up put me in a place where I was visible to others. Mm. And then this opportunity was then offered to me because I was there in their face.
Yep.
And I applied and was accepted into this vocational program and spent 6 weeks in the US, fully funded, which was wonderful. We had to provide our own spending money, but I went to northeast Texas with 4 other women, and we were hosted by families. And part of that was that each week we went to different towns and we would do presentations about our life and share our experiences with the Rotarians and other people within the area. And that was marvellous, to meet so many new people and to be in a place where nobody knew me. So again, I had a chance to express myself without feeling judged, which I didn't realise how much that mattered to me. It still does. It's still one of my little triggers, is that I need I need to remind myself that I'm okay as I am. And so because nobody knew me, I found myself being a bit of the clown. And I found my sense of humour again. And I had a lot of fun. And I could be silly. And nobody was judging me. And in fact, they liked it. And all these experiences made me go, wow, I'm all right. And so all of this just helped me to build as an individual. I think I used to feel that if I was too much of this, if I was too loud or I was too outspoken, that it would be perceived negatively. People would say, oh, she's too loud, or she's a bitch.
There was an interesting comment you made once before to me that I just wanted to ask you about, and that was you mentioned that you had a sense at one point that you were scared of getting well again in case you lost this new enlightenment.
Yes. Yeah. It's funny, isn't it? It forced change on me. My life circumstances forced it, and I think that's actually a gift. And a few other people I've spoken to who have chronic illness, who have had really dramatic things happen in their life, have seen the same, is that you get to a point where you're so low that you have to act to survive. I don't think I would have... I don't think I would have done it for myself had my life just bumbled along without any drama in it. So being forced to learn new skills and to face these things was a real gift. And when I started to discover how much better and how much more love I had for myself, it was tied to my MS diagnosis. And it was like it was an excuse for me to have done all these things and do all these things for myself because I was sick. It was like I needed a reason. And I talked through that with my psych and have thought about it a lot, because it's so funny you say that. I found myself doing it again the other day. My desire is still, now I know my passion is, and what my heart loves is to give and be part of a community. Like I want to live in love, and I want to share and participate and give back. And I actually get more out of that than I give. So that for me is where my life is, and it's the thing that gives me passion. And the fact that I still have to work for a living frustrates me at times, because I want to be able to give all of my time to that. It's an idealistic world vision, I know. But I realised again the other day that I was doing it to myself, that I was looking for a reason, like, oh, maybe if I got sicker and I couldn't work, or if I was suddenly diagnosed with something like cancer and I only had 12 months to live, that then I would stop doing all the things that I do because I feel I have to, or I do have to, and I would go off and travel around the world and make veggie patches in Africa. I would do that. It's like I'm still looking for the reason that I'm allowed to do that.
So we don't have to wait for catastrophe to strike before we can actually go and pursue our goals and our dreams and make things happen.
Yes, I'm still reminding myself.
We don't need that permission. We just need to give ourselves permission to go after those things.
That's right. And I think it's about finding a balance between what you have to do and what you want to do, or what your heart needs. You can do both. So I still volunteer. I work for a local sanctuary and care for animals, and I do that in my spare time. I make time for the things that matter to me. So I don't let my work take over everything, and the fact that I have to work part-time because I can't physically do it anymore because of my spine and my energy levels with my MS are a blessing.
So even as the superwoman that you've become through all of these ordeals, you're still doing that work on yourself. You said you're still reading self-help books. You're still having to counsel yourself or seek counsel from supportive people to get you through. Even after everything you've been through, you still have some of those self-doubts that we all experience.
I'm human.
Exactly. And yet you've been able to keep on going. So describe for me what's your life like today now that you've gone through all this?
I've discovered that you can still be happy no matter what your circumstances are. Even if you're worried about something, it doesn't mean that you have to carry it with you 24/7. I had a wonderful piece of advice about learning to handle my MS, and that was that, yes, it is your life. Like, you have an illness. You have to make room for it in your house, but you don't have to let it take over your home. So I've got to give it a room in the house.
Great analogy.
Yeah. And so you can still have worries, but you don't have to be expressing or holding on to them 24/7. So my worries about my health never go away, but I choose not to put them in the forefront of my mind, and I choose not to repeatedly speak about them. That's another skill that I've learned, is that whatever you say out loud is what your brain believes. And I know if I say I'm sick, I'm sick, I'm sick, then that's what my subconscious is going to believe. If I say I'm having a great day, then my subconscious is going to believe that. Doesn't mean I'm not sick, but it's about attitude and about reinforcing the fact that you can be happy no matter what's going on in your life. Again, I'm not saying you're going to be joyous and skipping down the road, but you don't have to sit. It's about not dwelling in that place, not putting all your focus on that. It's about focusing on other things, distracting yourself, I think, in a lot of ways, from the pain and suffering that you're going through physically or emotionally, and focusing on positive things. Yeah.
Wow, you've covered just about everything there, I think. Finally, if we could just come to, what do you think has been the greatest life lesson, if you had to sum it up in one sentence? What's been the greatest thing that you've learned from all of this incredible journey that you've been on?
Oh, that's a good question.
What do you think it would be?
We're all responsible for ourselves. At the end of the day, we are on our own journeys, and we are doing it alone. That doesn't mean that you can't rely on other people, but if you don't take responsibility for yourself, then you're a victim, because you can only control yourself. You can't control anything else. So if you don't take control of that, then you're always going to be a victim to circumstance. So, and that sounds a bit harsh, but nobody else is going to do it for you. I mean, and like I say, the reason that you must rely on friends, you must ask for help. But if you don't ask, which is your responsibility, then you won't get the help. So you can't sit there and complain to yourself and expect the help. So it does really come down to being responsible for self and going, this isn't working for me, I'm uncomfortable, or I'm in pain. What am I going to do about it? So I guess that's it. At the end of the day, you got to own it.
Well, thank you, Tilai. It's been an absolute pleasure to talk with you on Australian Real today.
Thank you.
Thanks for coming in.
Thank you very much, Tony.